Victoria Harper slammed both hands on the conference table so hard that every glass of water in the room shook. "Cancel it," she said. "Cancel the entire merger." 47 people in that room held their breath, but the most powerful woman in that boardroom wasn't looking at her executives. She was looking at her phone, at a photo of her 6-year-old daughter, a little girl who hadn't spoken a single word to anyone outside their home in 11 months. Doctors had answers. Therapists had strategies. Victoria had billions of dollars. And none of it brought her daughter's voice back. Until a broken man with a toolbox walked into their lives and did the one thing Victoria never could. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it moves, you hit subscribe. Every story I tell is worth your time. The elevator was broken again. That was the first thing Marcus Webb noticed when he arrived at the 43rd floor lobby of Harper Financial Group's Manhattan headquarters on a Tuesday morning in early October. The main elevator, the one that the board members used, the one with the brushed gold doors and the soft classical music playing inside, had a red, out-of-service strip across it. Marcus was Victoria Harper's chief of staff. He had worked for her for 6 years, which meant he had survived 2 recessions. One, near criminal investigation into a rival fund that Victoria helped expose 3 CFO replacements, and one very memorable Christmas party, where the head of derivatives had tried to give a toast and accidentally revealed he'd been shorting his own firm's stock. Marcus had seen things, but nothing in 6 years had prepared him for the expression on Victoria Harper's face when she stepped off the service elevator that morning, her daughter on her hip, and said completely calm, completely cold, "Which idiot scheduled maintenance for conference week?" Nobody answered. "Find out," she said, "and have someone explain to me why a building that costs $42 million a year to operate cannot keep one elevator functional during the most important event of the fiscal quarter." She set Lily down beside her. Lily, 6 years old. Dark brown hair pulled into 2 pigtails that were slightly uneven, because Victoria had done them herself at 6:15 that morning, immediately reached up and took her mother's hand. She didn't look at anyone in the lobby. She pressed herself against her mother's side and looked down at the floor. Nobody spoke to Lily. They knew better, not because Victoria had told them not to, but because everyone who worked at Harper Financial had heard the story in pieces whispered in hallways, shared in careful voices about how the CEO's daughter had stopped talking, about therapy and specialists and a diagnosis that nobody quite knew how to pronounce correctly, about how 11 months ago Lily Harper had attended a school presentation, stood in front of her class to read a poem she had written herself, and then just stopped, froze, walked back to her seat, sat down, and hadn't spoken a single word to anyone outside her home since. They knew. So nobody spoke to her. And that was somehow the loneliest thing Victoria had ever seen. "Mrs. Harper." Marcus fell into step beside her as she moved through the lobby. Lily's small hand wrapped tightly around 3 of her mother's fingers. "The Meridian delegation arrives at 9. Bryce Keller's team confirmed last night they want the contract finalized before the keynote. Tell Bryce Keller's team that contracts don't get finalized before I've had coffee. You have coffee." He held up a thermos. "I have lukewarm coffee, Marcus. That doesn't count." "Also," he hesitated. Victoria looked at him sideways. She had a way of doing that, just a slight turn of the head like a hawk adjusting its focus, that made most people immediately confess whatever they were withholding. "Dr. Mendez's office called," Marcus said, "about rescheduling Lily's appointment from Thursday." Victoria's jaw tightened. Just barely. Just for a fraction of a second. "Reschedule it to Friday. You have the Harrington Fund review on Friday. Then move the Harrington review." "They've rescheduled twice already. They're not—" "Marcus." Her voice didn't rise. It never rose. That was what made it frightening. It simply became very, very quiet. "Move the Harrington review." He moved it. That was how Victoria Harper operated. Not through volume. Not through intimidation in the conventional sense. She operated through absolute certainty, the kind of certainty that made people around her feel as though arguing with her was not merely futile, but somehow structurally impossible, like trying to negotiate with gravity. She had built Harper Financial Group from a two-person advisory firm operating out of a shared office space in Midtown into a billion-dollar investment empire before she was 35. She had done it through a combination of extraordinary financial instinct, a near photographic memory for numbers, and a willingness to make decisions that other people spent months avoiding. She was by every measurable external standard formidable. But right now, walking toward her office with her daughter's hand in hers, she felt none of that. She felt the weight of 11 months. Victoria's corner office had a wall of windows that looked out over the East River. On clear mornings, you could see all the way to Brooklyn, the bridges strung like jewelry across the water, the city doing what it always did, moving, pushing, refusing to stop. She had loved that view once. Now it mostly reminded her of distance. She settled Lily at the small corner table she kept stocked for days like this, art supplies, a few books, a soft blanket that Lily had asked to keep there because the office was too cold, which she had communicated by pointing to the blanket, pointing to the office, and then crossing her arms and shivering in an exaggerated way that had made Victoria laugh despite everything. Lily communicated in a language that required translation, drawings, gestures, the specific pressure of a hand squeeze, 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 for I need you right now, and I can't say it, but please don't let go. Victoria had become fluent in it. She hated that she had. Not because she resented her daughter, she would have walked barefoot across every borough of this city for Lily Harper without a second thought. But because the fact that she was fluent in silence meant that the silence was still there. And every specialist who sat across from her with their clipboards and their measured tones had said the same essential thing in different words. The anxiety is real. The mutism is real. She will speak when she feels safe. And every time Victoria heard it, the same question detonated quietly somewhere behind her sternum. Why doesn't she feel safe with me? Lil, she said softly, kneeling beside the table as Lily arranged her colored pencils in a line, always in the same order. Violet to red, the spectrum reversed so that the cool colors came first. You're going to stay here with Diane today, okay? During my meetings. Lily looked at her. One slow blink. Not yes, not no. Just acknowledgement. I'll come check on you at lunch. We'll get that sandwich you like from the place on the corner. Lily's expression didn't change much, but her hand moved. She reached over and picked up the violet pencil and held it out to Victoria. Victoria took it. She didn't know what it meant exactly, but she held it. I love you, she said. Lily pressed her small palm flat against her mother's cheek, warm, steady. That was her answer. Victoria stood, straightened her jacket, and walked out of the office to go manage a merger worth $240 million. She left the violet pencil on her desk, where she could see it. The thing about Victoria Harper that most people misunderstood was this. They thought the coldness was the real her. They thought the precision, the controlled, affect the boardroom stillness. They thought that was the authentic Victoria, and that everything else was performance. A concession to sentimentality she couldn't quite discipline herself out of. They were wrong. The real Victoria was the woman who had spent 11 months sleeping with her phone on the pillow beside her in case Lily woke up and needed her in the night. The real Victoria was the woman who had read 14 books on childhood anxiety, spoken to 9 different specialists, tried 4 different therapeutic approaches, quietly doubled her charitable giving to children's mental health organizations, and still couldn't fix this. The real Victoria was a woman who was losing a war she didn't know how to fight. And the thing about Victoria Harper was that she did not lose. She had never lost. Not in business. Not in negotiation. Not in the 12 years she had spent clawing her way up through an industry that had told her in 100 different subtle and not so subtle ways that she didn't belong, that she was too young, too female, too much. She had won every time, except this one, which was why when Marcus appeared in the doorway of conference room A at 11:47 that morning, his expression doing something complicated and controlled that meant the news was bad. Victoria felt the first real cold thread of something move through her chest before he even opened his mouth. "She's not in the office," Marcus said. Victoria was on her feet before the sentence finished. Diane stepped out to get coffee. She was gone for 4 minutes. She said Lily was drawing. She was perfectly calm. She was... Which direction? Victoria's voice was absolutely flat. "We don't know. Security is checking the cameras now." "Get me the feeds." Victoria. "Get me the feeds." Marcus. She was already moving. The building had 19 floors of office space, 3 levels of event space, 2 parking structures, and a service corridor network that ran behind the main floors like a hidden skeleton. Victoria knew the layout because she had approved every renovation in the last 8 years. She knew where the service stairs came out. She knew which corridors connected to which loading areas. She moved through the building the way she moved through everything: fast, purposeful, radiating a focused energy that made people step aside without quite knowing why. But her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs as she walked. Lily was somewhere in this building. Lily who didn't talk to strangers. Lily who pressed herself against walls in crowded rooms. Lily who had wandered away from the noise of a conference that had approximately 230 people in it and was now somewhere alone in a building she didn't know. She will speak when she feels safe. She has to be safe. She has to be. Victoria pushed open the door to the main service corridor on the event level and stopped. The corridor was dim fluorescent lights, concrete floor, the low hum of building systems. It smelled like motor oil and the particular dusty cold of industrial spaces. At the far end, past a junction box and a stack of equipment cases, was the main elevator shaft service area. And sitting on the floor, beside a large open panel of switches and cables tools spread carefully around him in a half circle, was a man in work clothes. He was talking. And sitting cross-legged beside him, holding something small in both hands, looking at it with total concentration, was Lily. Victoria Harper, who had not cried in a boardroom in 12 years, who had delivered bad news to investors without her voice breaking, who had sat in a hospital room during her divorce proceedings and not made a sound. Stopped breathing, because Lily was nodding. And then Lily's mouth moved, and what came out was a voice Victoria had not heard directed at another human being outside their home in 11 months. Small, soft, careful, but real. "Does it hurt when it breaks?" Victoria's back hit the wall. Her hand went to her mouth. The man looked at Lily. Not surprised, not making a big deal of it, just looking at her the way you look at a kid who's asked a completely reasonable question and said, "The elevator number elevators don't feel pain, but the people waiting for them sure do." And Lily. Lily made a sound. A small sound. A laugh. Half a laugh. Quiet, cut off almost as soon as it started. But real. Victoria stood in that doorway and didn't move. The man picked up something from his toolkit, a small cylindrical component, and held it out to Lily. "This is called a relay. It's basically the elevator's way of listening. When the signal comes in, the relay decides whether to let it through." Lily took it carefully in both hands, turned it over. "What if it decides wrong?" she asked. "Then everything stops," the man said simply. "That's why you have to keep it clean. Keep it honest. A relay that's got too much dirt in it can't hear the signal right. Starts making decisions based on noise instead of the real thing." Lily considered this. She turned the relay over in her hands one more time. Then she said very quietly, "My mom has a lot of noise." The man looked at her for a moment. "Most good moms do," he said. "Doesn't mean they can't hear you." Victoria's eyes burned. She pressed her hand harder against her mouth and did not make a sound. She watched. His name, she would learn later, was Nathan Cole, but right now, she didn't know his name. She only knew his hands. Large, careful hands that moved around the tools with quiet efficiency, even while he talked. She knew his voice, steady, unhurried, with a slight roughness to it, that sounded like someone who had spent a long time in wind or weather. She knew the way he was sitting completely relaxed on a concrete floor beside an open elevator panel, as if this was a perfectly natural place to be having a conversation. And she knew that he had not once looked at Lily like she was a problem. Not once. Every adult Lily encountered in formal settings did some version of the same thing. Even the well-meaning ones, a slight adjustment in their expression. A specific kind of careful attentiveness that communicated louder than any words. We know about you. We know you don't talk. We are going to be very gentle and very patient with you because you are fragile. And children felt that. Lily felt everything. Victoria had watched her daughter retreat inside herself every single time she sensed that quality in another person's attention. It was like watching someone pull a window shut. But this man hadn't done that. He had sat down on the floor and talked about elevators. My daughter asked me once why buildings have so many buttons, Nathan was saying, now putting the relay carefully to one side and picking up a different tool. She's 4. 4-year-olds ask why about everything. I told her the buttons were so people could tell the building where they needed to go. What did she say? Lily asked. She said, what if the building is tired of listening? Lily looked at him. Is she right? I don't know, Nathan said. Maybe, but I think buildings are built to carry things. That's kind of the whole point of them. He glanced at the panel. Same as elevators. They're not supposed to stay in one place. They're supposed to move. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm not very good at moving. Nathan looked at her, not with pity, not with that careful therapeutic attention Victoria had come to dread, but with the simple, direct attention of someone who was genuinely listening. You moved in here, didn't you? He said. Lily blinked. Away from all those people, he said. All that noise. You found somewhere quieter. That's not being bad at moving. That's knowing what you need. Lily looked down at her hands. Then she said very softly, the words coming out careful and slow, like she was testing the weight of them. My mom doesn't think I know what I need. I don't think that's true, Nathan said. She gets scared. Yeah, he said. Moms do that. Do you get scared? Something moved across his face. Not pain exactly. More like the shadow of something that had been pain and was now just memory. Every day, he said quietly. I've got a little girl too. She's 4. Her name's Sophie. I get scared for her all the time. Where is she? At preschool right now. She's probably terrorizing her teacher. He smiled, and it was a real smile, the kind that used the corners of the eyes. She talks enough for both of us. Sometimes I think she could have a full conversation with a wall if the wall would just stand still long enough. And there it was. The moment that Victoria would replay in her mind for months. Because Lily Harper, her daughter, her quiet, careful, silent daughter, who hadn't chosen to speak to a stranger in 11 months, looked at this man on the floor with his tools and his honest hands and his voice that didn't make anything into a bigger deal than it was, and smiled and said barely above a whisper, She sounds nice. Nathan Cole went very still, just for a moment. His hands paused over the tools, and then he looked at Lily with an expression that Victoria, watching from the doorway, could only describe as recognition. Not surprise, recognition. Like he understood exactly what it meant for those 2 words to have come out of this particular child's mouth in this particular moment. She is, he said. His voice was gentler now. Still easy, still unhurried. But something in it had shifted. Like a room where someone has very quietly opened a window. She really is. You'd like her, I think. Lily turned the relay over in her hands. What's her favorite color? She asked. Changes every week, Nathan said. Last week it was orange. The week before it was what she calls the color of thunder, which I think is gray, but she won't confirm it. The color of thunder, Lily repeated, like she was filing it away somewhere. What's yours? Nathan asked. Lily thought about it. Violet, she said, because it's at the beginning. Beginning of what? The colors, Lily said. When you put them in order, Violet comes first. Nathan nodded slowly. That makes sense to me, he said, and he meant it. Victoria could hear that he meant it. She pressed herself against the wall. She wasn't going to go in there. She wasn't going to interrupt this. She would sooner have walked off the roof of this building than interrupted this. Nathan, Lily said. She had learned his name, or he had told it to her at some point before Victoria arrived. She said it with the quiet confidence of a child who had decided someone was trustworthy. Why did the elevator break? Because the relay got too much interference, he said, turning back to the panel. The signal got confused. Can you fix it? That's what I'm here for. Lily watched him work for a moment. Then she said, My mom fixes things too. What kind of things? Money things. Big things. A pause. She can't fix me, though. The words landed in the corridor like something dropped from a height. Nathan's hands kept moving, but slowly, carefully. You know what I think, he said. Lily looked at him. I think you're not broken, he said simply. I think you're a relay with a lot of interference. And I think when the interference clears, you're going to carry a signal that makes people stop and listen. Victoria's throat closed. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. She did not make a sound. She would not take this from Lily. This moment, this impossible, unexpected, unplanned gift of a moment, it belonged to her daughter. Victoria had spent 11 months trying to orchestrate the conditions under which Lily might feel safe enough to speak. Specialists and strategies and carefully controlled environments. And it had happened here. In a concrete corridor. With a man who fixed elevators. Because he had talked to Lily like she was a person, not a patient. Because he had sat on the floor and talked about relays and 4-year-olds who could negotiate with walls and the color of thunder. Because he hadn't tried to fix anything. He had just been present. And it turned out that was the one thing, the one simple, devastating thing that Victoria Harper, with all her billions and all her certainty and all her fierce, consuming love for her daughter, had not known how to give. She stood in that doorway for another 4 minutes. She listened to her daughter talk. Lily asked about the tools. She asked about Sophie again. She asked whether elevators ever got lonely, which Nathan answered with complete seriousness, saying that he thought they probably didn't, because they were never alone. Someone was always needing them. She asked if he'd been to other buildings. She asked if all buildings felt different. And Nathan answered everything. Not performing patience, not demonstrating it. Just talking to a kid in a corridor the way you talk to someone you genuinely wanted to hear. Victoria finally stepped forward. Not all the way into the space, just enough to be visible. Lily turned first. And her face when she saw her mother was not scared, was not embarrassed, was not closed, it was just open. She held up the relay. Mom, she said. Clearly, easily, like she said it 100 times a day. This is Nathan. He fixes things. Victoria Harper, CEO founder. The most controlled woman in a building full of controlled people, felt her throat work twice before anything came out. I can see that, she said. Nathan Cole looked up from the panel. He had light brown eyes with something tired behind them. Not exhausted. Tired the way a person gets tired when they've been carrying something heavy for a long time, but have decided to keep carrying it because it matters. He looked at Victoria the way he had looked at Lily, directly, without performance, without the specific careful adjustment that most people made when they recognized her. She found me, he said simply. I hope that's all right. It's all right, Victoria said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. She didn't try to make it bigger. Can't. Later, much later. After the building maintenance crew had passed through and the conference had moved into its second keynote session. Victoria stood outside the service corridor and breathed. Marcus found her there. He had the look of someone who had spent the last 40 minutes quietly managing a search operation while simultaneously preventing a $240 million negotiation from derailing, and who was now trying to determine whether his employer needed practical assistance or simply a moment of undisturbed space. He assessed correctly. He stood quietly beside her. "She talked," Victoria said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even really a statement for Marcus's benefit. It was more like she was testing the words, verifying them. "I know," Marcus said carefully. "To a stranger." "Yes." She said. Victoria stopped, pressed her lips together, started again. She said his daughter sounds nice. She talked about the color violet. She asked if elevators get lonely. Marcus said nothing. Victoria turned and looked back at the door. "He didn't do anything special," she said. "That's the thing. He just—" She stopped again. Something shifted in her face. Something that had been very tightly wound for a very long time. "He just talked to her." "Mrs. Harper, I've been trying to fix her," Victoria said. The word landed with the full weight of what it had taken her to say it. "For 11 months, I've been treating her like a problem I haven't solved yet. And this man sat on a concrete floor and talked to her about elevator parts." Marcus was quiet. "I need his file," she said finally. Her voice was coming back into its usual register, efficient, focused. But underneath it was something new. Something that hadn't been there this morning. His full employment record, his background, and find out if he's free for coffee. "He's a building systems contractor, Mrs. Harper. He's not an employee." "Then find out who he contracts through." She looked at Marcus. "Please." The please surprised him. He noted it. "Of course," he said. Victoria turned back toward the conference floor. She had a keynote to finish, a merger to close. 230 people waiting for her to stand at a podium and say the words that would determine whether this quarter became history. She walked back toward the conference room, but in her jacket pocket, her fingers closed around the violet pencil that Lily had given her that morning. She held onto it the whole way. Go. The conference wrapped at 4:30. Victoria gave the keynote. She closed the merger. Bryce Keller's team called it the cleanest negotiation they'd seen in years. She barely remembered any of it. What she remembered was the relay in her daughter's hands. What she remembered was the word Violet said, without hesitation, to a stranger on a concrete floor. What she remembered was the look on Nathan Cole's face. Not proud, not surprised, just quietly present, as if this was something he had simply known how to make room for. She remembered thinking, who is this man? And more than that, what happened to him that taught him how to do that? Marcus Webb was good at his job precisely because he understood that information had weight. Some information was light, easily carried, easily delivered, easily forgotten. Meeting rescheduled, contract amended. The caterer for the Meridian dinner had substituted the sea bass without asking, and some information landed differently. He had spent 6 years learning to read Victoria Harper's face well enough to know the difference before he opened his mouth. It was a skill he had developed the way you develop all survival skills, through repeated exposure to the consequences of getting it wrong. So when he walked into her office at 7:15 the following morning, 15 minutes before her first call, holding a single printed page, he moved carefully. He set the page on the corner of her desk, not directly in front of her, not handed to her personally, just placed, and stepped back. Victoria was standing at the window with her coffee. Real coffee this morning, not the lukewarm thermos. She had been in the office since 6. He knew because the security log showed her badge scan. She didn't look at the page right away. "How's Lily this morning?" Marcus asked. He almost never asked personal questions, but this one felt earned. Victoria turned slightly. "She talked at breakfast," she said. Just that. No elaboration. But something in the way she said it, the careful, deliberate flatness, the way you speak about something precious that you're afraid to examine too closely in case it dissolves, told Marcus everything he needed to know. "I'm glad," he said. Then he nodded at the page on the desk. Nathan Cole, 36 years old, Navy, 11 years rescue operations, 2 combat deployments, 1 classified, honorable discharge 3 years ago. His wife, Emily Cole, died approximately 8 months before his discharge, pancreatic cancer diagnosed late. He stopped. Victoria turned all the way around. He has a 4-year-old daughter, Marcus continued. Sophie, he's been her sole caregiver since. He paused again. He started the building systems work about 2 years ago. He's contracted through a company called Reliable Infrastructure Services out of Queens. Good record, no complaints. The building super says he's one of the best they've worked with, shows up early, works clean, never overcharges. Victoria looked at the page now. He lost his wife while he was deployed, she asked. She was diagnosed while he was overseas. He came back for the final 6 months. After she passed, he completed his service commitment and separated. Marcus's voice was even, professional, but he was watching Victoria's face. His commanding officer wrote a commendation letter that apparently used the phrase, "the kind of man you want beside you when everything goes wrong." Victoria picked up the page. She read it in the silence. Marcus waited. He didn't mention any of this, she said finally. No. Marcus agreed. She set the page down, looked at it for another moment, then looked at Marcus. Find me an hour this week, she said. Off-site, not a Harper Financial event, somewhere regular. Marcus raised an eyebrow, just slightly. Regular? A diner, a coffee shop, somewhere that doesn't have my name on the building. You want me to reach out to him directly? I want you to ask him, she said carefully, if he'd be willing to meet, not as a business contact, just... She stopped, seemed to be selecting the words with unusual precision. Just as people. Marcus nodded once. And Marcus, she added as he turned toward the door. Yes. Don't make it sound official. Don't send it on company letterhead. She looked back at the window. Just call him. Nathan Cole did not have a home office. He had a kitchen table. The kitchen table served as his desk, his filing cabinet, his meal planning center, and occasionally his workshop when he was doing small component repairs that didn't require the van. It was covered at any given moment in some combination of the following. Sophie's drawings, his work invoices the specific brand of fruit snacks that Sophie would eat, but only if they were the orange ones, his coffee mug and whatever book he was currently reading, which tonight was a worn paperback about military history that he'd picked up at a used bookstore in Astoria for $3. He was reading it and not really reading it. He had been doing that a lot lately. Opening the book, letting his eyes move across the lines, not taking anything in. His mind kept sliding sideways to the same place it had been sliding since yesterday afternoon. The little girl in the corridor. He had worked in a lot of buildings. He had been in a lot of spaces where people moved past him without making eye contact. Not out of rudeness exactly, more out of the specific urban habit of treating maintenance workers as part of the infrastructure rather than as people. He had learned not to mind it. It wasn't personal. It was just the shape of the work. But the child had been different. She had come around the corner of the service corridor like she was looking for something, though he didn't think she knew what. Stopped when she saw him. Didn't run. Didn't call out for her mother. Just stood there very still looking at him with dark eyes that had the particular quality of someone who was paying attention to everything at once. He had seen that look before. In Sophie sometimes on days when the world got too loud. In himself in mirrors during the first year after Emily died, when everything felt too close and too far away simultaneously. He had recognized it. So he hadn't made a production of it, hadn't tried to redirect her or find her parent, or make the moment into something that required management. He had just done what came naturally, which was talk. He talked to Sophie the same way, not down. Not with the particular high-pitched deliberateness some adults used with small children as if children communicated in a different frequency. Just talked. About whatever was in front of him. About the work. About how things worked. He hadn't known she wasn't speaking. He only found that out afterward when the woman appeared in the doorway. The mother. Victoria Harper. He hadn't placed the name immediately, but the look of her was unmistakable, even in an industrial corridor. The look of someone who moved through the world at a controlled velocity and had just come to a stop so sudden it had cost her something. He had watched her face for those few minutes while Lily talked. He hadn't looked away, because he recognized that too, what it looked like when someone heard something they had been afraid they might never hear again. He knew the exact quality of that stillness, the specific way the body stopped moving because moving would break it. He knew it because he had felt it himself. 8 months after Emily died, Sophie had started calling for her in the night. Not crying, not screaming, just calling. "Mama! Mama!" Over and over in her small, certain voice, the way children call for things they fully expect to appear. And Nathan had lain in the dark listening to it, and not been able to move for a full 30 seconds, because the sound was so ordinary and so unbearable at the same time. He had moved eventually. He always moved eventually. But he knew what that stillness felt like from the inside. He was thinking about all of this when his phone rang. Unknown number. New York area code. He almost let it go to voicemail. But some instinct from years of being on call, years of knowing that the calls you missed at unexpected hours were sometimes the ones that mattered, made him answer. Nathan Cole. A pause. Then a man's voice, professional, but not cold. "Mr. Cole, my name is Marcus Webb. I'm calling on behalf of Victoria Harper." Nathan set his book down. "I'm not in trouble, am I?" he said. A surprised pause. Then, with what sounded like carefully controlled amusement, "No, sir. Mrs. Harper would like to know if you'd be available to meet for coffee this week." Her words were, and I'm quoting directly just as people. Nathan looked at the kitchen table, at the fruit snacks and the invoices, and Sophie's latest drawing, which appeared to be a dog wearing a hat, though Sophie had described it as a wolf going to a party. "I work most days," he said. "She's flexible on timing. Whatever works for you." He thought about the woman in the doorway. He thought about what it had cost her to stand there quietly, to not go in, to let her daughter have that moment without turning it into a moment about her. That was not a small thing. He had met a lot of powerful people in his work, not usually at their level, not usually in any way that involved actual conversation, but he had been in enough rooms to understand that the higher up people got, the harder it was for them to stand still. The harder it was to be in a room and not be the person making things happen. Victoria Harper had stood in that doorway and made nothing happen. And her daughter had talked. "Thursday morning," he said. "Early, before 8. "I'll make it work," Marcus said. After he hung up, Nathan sat for a moment at the kitchen table. Then he got up, went to the hallway, and looked in on Sophie. She was asleep on her stomach with her blanket mostly on the floor, and her stuffed elephant named with Sophie's typical decisive commitment, Captain, tucked under her chin. She was breathing with the specific total body quality of 4-year-old sleep, completely abandoned to it, both arms flung out. Nathan leaned against the doorframe and watched her breathe. He thought about the little girl in the corridor, Lily. The way she'd said she sounds nice with such careful deliberateness, like she was trying out the shape of the words in the air. Sophie would like her, he thought. Sophie liked everyone. But she would like Lily specifically the same way Sophie was drawn to anything that was quiet on the outside and full on the inside. She had an instinct for it. He pushed off the doorframe and went back to the kitchen. He didn't pick up the book. He sat at the table and thought, which was something he usually tried to avoid after 8 o'clock, because late-night thinking had a tendency to slide in directions that didn't help anyone. But tonight, the thinking stayed in a manageable place. He thought about what it must be like to be that woman. To have built everything. To have all the tools the world recognized as tools, money, power, influence, access. And to have none of them work on the one thing that mattered most. He thought about how that must feel. He thought he probably understood it more than she would expect, because he had had his own version. Not money, he had never had money in that sense. But the Navy had given him something similar, the absolute bone-deep certainty that if the mission was clear, and the team was right, and the execution was precise, you would succeed. That problems yielded to the correct application of training and will. And then Emily had gotten sick, and there was no mission. There was no team. There was no correct application of anything. There was just a woman he loved in a hospital bed and the inexorable mathematics of a disease that did not care about his service record or his deployment history or any of the things he had trained 11 years to be. He had failed that one, not through any error, not through anything he could have done differently. But he had failed it just the same in the way that survival always feels like failure when the person next to you doesn't make it. He knew what it felt like to be powerful in every way the world measured power and to kneel in front of something you couldn't fix. He knew exactly what that felt like, and he thought that maybe that was why when he looked at Victoria Harper's face in that doorway, he had felt something that was not pity and not professional sympathy, but something more like recognition. The same word that had come to him with Lily: recognition. He went to bed at 10:30. He slept better than he had in a while. The coffee shop Marcus had chosen was a narrow place on West 47th that didn't have Harper Financial's name on it, had no private rooms, and was in Nathan's assessment when he arrived at 7:50 Thursday morning, extremely ordinary in the best possible way. Small tables, real mugs, a chalkboard with the specials that included something called a Morning Warrior Bowl that he was not going to order. Victoria was already there. She was sitting at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a mug, wearing a coat he recognized as expensive, even though he couldn't have explained why, and she was looking at her phone with the focused attention she probably brought to everything, until she heard the bell above the door and looked up, and then she put the phone face down on the table. He noticed that. "Mr. Cole," she said, and started to stand. "Nathan," he said. "Please." She settled back. "Nathan." She nodded at the seat across from her. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for the invite." He sat, got his coat off, flagged down the server and ordered a coffee black. Then he looked at her directly. "How's Lily?" Something moved through her expression, quick, complicated, grateful. Like she'd been bracing for something more formal and hadn't had to deploy it. "She talked at dinner last night," Victoria said, "about elevators." Nathan smiled. He couldn't help it. "She told my housekeeper Rosa that the building's elevator probably needed its relay cleaned." Victoria's mouth curved. Rosa had no idea what that meant, but she said it was the most Lily had spoken to her in months. "Lily picks up things fast," Nathan said. "She asked really good questions. She always has." Victoria looked down at her mug. Before last year, she was one of those kids who filled every silence. Constant questions, constant observations. She used to narrate her own life out loud, like a little documentary. A pause. And then it stopped. Nathan waited. He had learned through years of rescue work and through the specific education of being Sophie's sole parent that some things needed to be said at the pace the speaker could manage, and the only useful contribution a listener could make was to not rush it. "The school called it a bad day," Victoria continued. "A performance that went wrong. They said she'd recover in a few days. And then the days became weeks, and the weeks became months, and every specialist said something slightly different, and She stopped. Her jaw tightened briefly. "I kept approaching it like a problem that had a solution. Like if I assembled the right team and applied the right resources, I would find the answer." "And it didn't work," Nathan said, not unkindly. "Nothing worked." She said it plainly, not with self-pity, but with the flat acknowledgement of someone who has stopped pretending. "I hired the best people I could find. I restructured my schedule. I read everything there was to read on childhood anxiety. I learned sign language basics in case—" She stopped again, took a breath. "In case she never came back." The last sentence landed quietly. Nathan looked at her. "She's back," he said. "She was always there," Victoria said. "That's what I keep realizing. She was always there. She was drawing and gesturing and squeezing my hand and communicating everything. I was the one who couldn't—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I was the one who couldn't hear it because it wasn't in the right format." Nathan thought about that. "My daughter went through something similar. he said. Not the same. But after Emily died, he watched Victoria's face register the name, the past tense, the implication. Sophie stopped eating regular food for about 3 months, only would eat certain textures, certain colors. Took me 2 months to realize she wasn't being difficult. She was trying to control something, anything in a world that had just demonstrated very clearly that things could disappear. Victoria was watching him. I took her to a specialist, Nathan continued. Good woman. Very qualified. Explained to me very thoroughly, very kindly, that Sophie was exhibiting sensory-based coping behaviors related to grief and anxiety, and that we needed to implement a gradual desensitization program combined with positive reinforcement around mealtimes. He paused. I tried it for 3 weeks. Sophie got worse. What did you do? I stopped trying to fix it, he said. I just sat with her at meals, ate what she ate, didn't comment on it, didn't make it into a thing. Just sat there and talked about whatever we talked about. Her shows the truck she saw outside Captain the Elephant's emotional needs. He lifted his mug. After about 2 weeks, she started eating other things again. Not because we'd implemented a program, because she'd figured out I wasn't going anywhere. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. She just needed to know you weren't going anywhere, she said. Yeah. And you? She stopped, started again. With Lily, in the corridor, you weren't trying to get her to talk. I wasn't thinking about that at all, he said. I was thinking about the relay junction. You were just working, he said, and she was there, so I talked. Victoria set her mug down. She looked at him with an expression that Nathan couldn't quite name, something between assessment and something more open than that, like someone who had been looking at a problem from one angle for a very long time and had just shifted their position and found it was a different shape than they'd thought. Tell me about the Navy, she said. He looked at her. I had your background pulled, she said, not apologetically, but not defensively either, just honestly. 11 years. Rescue operations, 2 deployments. I don't know what that means in any specific detail, but I know it means something. It means I spent 11 years going into places after things went wrong, Nathan said. Pulling people out. Most of the time it worked. Sometimes it didn't. He looked at the table. The times it didn't, those are the ones you carry. What do you carry? She asked. It was a direct question. Most people didn't ask direct questions about that. They approached it sideways, if they approached it at all. That must have been hard, or I can't imagine things that were really just ways of acknowledging the existence of something without having to look straight at it. Victoria Harper looked straight at things. He respected that. I carry a night in the Strait of Hormuz, he said. 2018. We were going after a vessel, American contractor, 2 crew members. We got one out. The other one? He stopped, looked at his coffee. The weather, the current, the timing. There were 20 things that would have had to go differently. But I was the one in the water and he wasn't, and that's the thing I carry. The table was quiet. I carry Emily every day, he added more quietly. Not the grief of it, or not only that. I carry the version of her I'm supposed to be living up to. She was the kind of person who made everyone around her better without them quite knowing how. And I wake up every morning trying to figure out how to be the parent she would have been. Victoria was very still. Do you? She asked softly. Do you figure it out? Nathan thought about Sophie asleep with Captain under her chin, about fruit snacks and the color of thunder, about a 4-year-old who could negotiate with walls. Some days, he said, some days I just get through it, and that has to be enough. Victoria looked down at her mug. I've been telling myself that Lily's anxiety is something that happened to us, she said. A condition, an external event, like weather. She was speaking carefully, choosing each word with the same precision Nathan suspected she brought to major financial decisions. But I think... A pause, long enough that he didn't try to fill it. I think I need to look at the part I played, not as a cause. Specialists have been very clear that I'm not the cause, but as a... She searched for the word. As a variable. What kind of variable? I work a lot, she said bluntly. I have worked a lot since Lily was born. I have always told myself that I work for her future, for her security, and that's true. But I also work because I'm better at it than I am at anything else, and I think Lily has known that for most of her life. The admission landed on the table between them, clean and unhedged. Nathan looked at her. You know what I noticed yesterday? He said. In the corridor, when you were in the doorway. She looked at him. You didn't come in, he said. You stood there and let her have it. You didn't make it about you being relieved, or you being scared, or you wanting to hold her. You just waited. Victoria said nothing. That's not someone who doesn't know how to be present, he said. That's someone who knows exactly when to get out of the way. Something crossed her face. A quick, complicated movement that she didn't quite manage to contain. I had to, she said. If I'd gone in there. I know, he said. But you didn't. And that was the right call. It was the hardest thing I've done in months, she said. Standing in that doorway and not... She stopped, pressed her lips together. She was talking, Nathan. She was asking you about elevators and Sophie, and she was laughing, and I wanted so badly to... She stopped again. I wanted to go to her. I wanted to hold her. But I knew if I made it into a moment, she would feel the weight of it, and she would... Shut down, Nathan said. Yes. So you waited. I waited. He nodded. That's not nothing, he said. That's a lot. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Something in the careful structure of her expression shifted just slightly. Not a collapse. More like a door opening a measured amount enough to let light through, not enough to lose control of what was on the other side. Why did you say yes, she asked, to meeting me? Nathan considered. Because I looked at your face in that doorway, he said, and I recognized it. What did you recognize? Someone who loves someone very much and has no idea what they're doing. He said it without any sharpness, just as fact. I know what that looks like. It looks like me every single day. Victoria made a sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. I manage a billion-dollar company, she said. And Sophie can't find Captain the Elephant and I completely fall apart, Nathan said. It's not the same skill set. This time she did laugh. Quietly, short, but real. Nathan thought it was probably not something she did very often. He filed it away without making a thing of it. Can I ask you something? He said. Yes. When was the last time you did something that had nothing to do with either the company or Lily's treatment? She looked at him. Something just for you, he clarified. Something with no strategic purpose. The silence that followed was long enough to be its own answer. I read, she said finally. At night in bed. On the treadmill, she said. Industry journals mostly. Nathan looked at her. That doesn't count, he said. I know, she said quietly. What did you used to do before? She thought about it. Genuinely thought, not deflected. I used to paint, she said. Watercolors. I was terrible at it. I did it for about 2 years in my 20s when I was still building the firm, and it was the only hour in my day that nobody needed anything from me. What happened to it? I got better at the firm, she said. The firm needed more hours. Nathan said nothing. You think I should start again, she said. I think you should have something that belongs only to you, he said. Not because it'll fix Lily, not as a strategy. Just because... He paused, looked for the right way. Sophie has Captain. Captain is not strategic. Captain serves no developmental purpose. Captain is just hers, completely no justification required. He looked at Victoria. Everyone needs a captain. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. That's the strangest piece of advice anyone has given me in years, she said. How's it landing? She picked up her mug. Better than most of the other advice I've received, she said. They sat for another 40 minutes. They talked about Sophie's preschool and Lily's drawings, about the building systems Nathan had worked on around the city, and the strange specific poetry of keeping old infrastructure running. about what it was like to deliver a keynote and whether the size of the audience made it easier or harder. Nathan asked because he was genuinely curious. Victoria thought about it and said it was easier because the distance made the stakes feel more abstract. In small rooms, she said, I can see the faces of people who are deciding whether to trust me. That's harder. You're in a small room right now, Nathan said. She looked at him. How's that going? He asked. Victoria Harper considered the question. Better than expected, she said. Nathan paid for his coffee before she could offer to. She noticed that. She started to say something and then didn't. They stood outside on 47th Street in the early morning, and the city moved around them the way it always did, indifferent and relentless and somehow sustaining. I'd like Lily to meet Sophie sometime, Victoria said. If you're open to it. Sophie would never forgive me if I said no, Nathan said. She needs an audience. 4-year-olds who talk too much require witnesses. Victoria smiled. That quiet, short smile that he was starting to understand was the real one. Thursday after next, she said. There's a park near my building. Lily likes the benches by the fountain. The noise of the water helps her. We'll be there, Nathan said. He put his hands in his pockets and turned toward the subway. Nathan? Victoria said. He stopped. Thank you, she said. For yesterday. For not making it into a thing. She did all the work, he said. I know, Victoria said. But you made the room. He thought about that for a moment. Then he nodded once, and turned and walked toward the subway entrance. And the city swallowed him the way it swallowed everyone without ceremony, without acknowledgement, without any particular regard for the weight of what he was carrying. He carried it anyway. He always did. And somewhere across the city, in a corner office with a view of the East River, a violet pencil was sitting on a desk where a woman had put it so she wouldn't forget. She hadn't forgotten. She wasn't going to. The Thursday after next came with the particular cruelty of a beautiful October morning, cold enough to require a coat, bright enough to make you feel guilty for staying inside the sky. That specific shade of sharp blue that Manhattan only produced in autumn, as if the city were trying to compensate for everything it would do to you in February. Victoria had been awake since 5. Not because of work, though. There was work. There was always work. 3 emails from the Meridian team, a quarterly projection Marcus needed reviewed before noon, and a call with a London counterpart that had to happen before 8 because of the time difference. She handled all of it by 6:45, standing at her kitchen counter in her robe, while Lily sat at the breakfast table drawing. Lily was drawing a relay. Victoria recognized it immediately. The cylindrical shape, the small lines indicating the internal components, the careful attention to proportion that Lily had always brought to her drawings, even when the subject was imaginary. She was drawing it from memory, which meant she had held it in her mind for 10 days, which meant it had mattered. Lil, Victoria said, putting her mug down. Can I see? Lily held up the paper without looking up from it. She was still working on one edge. Victoria looked at it. It was accurate. More accurate than a 6-year-old drawing had any right to be. The relay, the casing, the internal mechanism, sketched in with a few careful lines that somehow conveyed the thing's function without being technical drawings. That's really good, Victoria said. Lily lowered the paper and looked at it herself, tilted her head, added one more line to the bottom. Nathan said every part has a purpose, she said. Victoria stayed very still, not because Lily was talking. Lily had been talking more since the corridor in the measured, thoughtful way she used to before everything stopped. Not big floods of words, not the narrated documentary quality of her early childhood, but real sentences offered carefully to people she had decided were safe. Victoria had made it onto that list again. She was trying very hard not to treat that as something that could be taken away. He's right, Victoria said. Every part does. Lily looked at her mother. Do I have a purpose? She asked. The question landed with the specific weight that only a 6-year-old could put on a question not philosophical, not anxious, just curious, genuinely wanting to know. Victoria crossed to the table and sat down beside her. "You are the purpose," she said. "Not a part of something else, the whole thing." Lily considered this, looked back at her drawing. "Captain has a purpose too," she said. Victoria blinked. "Who's Captain?" "Sophie's elephant," Lily said. She said it with the casual confidence of someone referencing a mutual acquaintance. "He helps her sleep, Nathan told me." Victoria looked at her daughter. She thought about what Nathan had said. Everyone needs a captain, and felt something move in her chest that she had been feeling a lot lately, a kind of slow rearrangement. Like furniture being pushed into better positions in a room she'd lived in so long, she'd stopped seeing it clearly. "We're meeting them today," Victoria said. "Sophie and Nathan, at the park." Lily looked up. "I know," she said. "You're not worried." Lily thought about it with that characteristic deliberateness. "Sophie talks a lot," she said. "Nathan told me." "Does that bother you?" Another pause. "No," Lily said. "I like listening." She went back to her drawing. Victoria sat there for another minute, not getting up, not checking her phone. Just sitting. Nathan arrived at the park at 11 on the dot. Sophie did not arrive at the park at 11 on the dot. Sophie arrived in stages first, her voice coming around the corner at full volume, approximately 45 seconds, before the rest of her describing to Nathan, in complete detail, the narrative arc of a conflict that had apparently occurred at preschool between two children named Marcus with a C and Marcus with a K over the rightful ownership of a red crayon. "And then," Sophie said, appearing at the park entrance in her green coat and yellow boots, Captain tucked under one arm. Marcus with a K said it was his because it had his name on it, but Marcus with a C said that was impossible because it didn't have anybody's name on it because it was just a crayon. "Sophie," Nathan said. "And I told them both that crayons don't have feelings, so it didn't matter who had it but Sophie." She stopped, looked at him. "Look," he said, and nodded across the park. Sophie turned. Victoria Harper was sitting on a bench near the fountain with a child beside her. A girl smaller than Sophie with dark pigtails and a purple coat, looking in their direction with dark, careful eyes. Sophie did what Sophie always did when she spotted another child, which was to immediately begin walking toward them with the total unself-consciousness of someone who had never once been met with a closed door and simply assumed all doors were open. "Sophie," Nathan started. But Sophie was already halfway across the park. He watched her go. Then looked at Victoria, who had seen Sophie coming and was watching her with an expression somewhere between amusement and caution, the particular vigilance of a parent preparing to intervene if necessary. Nathan lifted a hand. Victoria's expression shifted into something that was close to relief. He walked over at a normal pace. Let Sophie have the 30 seconds ahead of him. By the time he reached the bench, Sophie had already stopped in front of Lily at a distance of approximately 2 feet, which for Sophie was a respectful, thoughtful distance, and said in a slightly more measured version of her normal volume. "Hi, I'm Sophie. Your coat is purple. My favorite color is orange, but last week it was silver, so I'm not sure yet." Lily looked at her. Nathan and Victoria both held very still. Then Lily said, "Mine is violet." "What's violet?" Sophie asked. "Purple, but at the beginning," Lily said, "of the colors." Sophie absorbed this, looked down at Lily's coat, back at Lily. "Do you want to see Captain?" she asked. She held up the elephant. Captain was gray, slightly worn at the trunk, with one button eye slightly larger than the other, because the original had been lost and replaced with what was available. Lily looked at Captain. She reached out and touched the trunk very carefully with 2 fingers. "His trunk is soft," she said. "That's because I rubbed it," Sophie said. "When I was a baby, I rubbed it for good luck. Now it's permanent." "Permanent," Lily repeated. "It means forever," Sophie said. "I know what it means," Lily said. Not unkindly, just factual. Sophie appeared unbothered. "Do you want to come see the fountain? There are some really good rocks near it." Lily looked at her mother. Victoria looked back at her. One squeeze. Lily's hand in hers, one squeeze. Victoria squeezed back. Lily stood up, and she walked away from the bench with Sophie Cole, who was already explaining the specific criteria for a good rock, and Nathan Cole watched his 4-year-old daughter walk beside a 6-year-old he had met 10 days ago, and felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight for a long time. He sat down on the bench beside Victoria. "Well," he said. "Well," she agreed. They watched the girls at the fountain. Sophie was pointing at something in the water. Lily was leaning forward looking. Sophie said something. Lily said something back. Sophie laughed her big, uninhibited laugh that Nathan had always thought sounded like a small brass instrument played with great enthusiasm and no particular technique. And Lily didn't laugh, but she smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached the eyes. "She's incredible," Victoria said quietly. She meant Sophie. "She is," Nathan agreed. "She's also exhausting. I want to be fully transparent about that." Victoria made that sound again, the almost laugh. "Lily used to be like that," she said. "Before. She used to fill every room." A pause. "I didn't always appreciate it when she did." "Nobody does," Nathan said. "While it's happening, it's just noise. And then when it stops, you'd give anything to have the noise back." Victoria turned and looked at him. "How do you know all of this?" she said. "You're 36. You've got a 4-year-old. You've been through things that would have destroyed most people, and instead you're—" She stopped. "How? Destroyed me plenty," Nathan said. "I just didn't stay that way." "Why not?" He thought about it. A real answer, not a managed one. "Because she needed me to get up," he said. He nodded toward Sophie. "Every morning, no matter what the night before was, no matter what I was carrying, no matter what I dreamed, no matter how loud the quiet got, she needed breakfast. She needed her shoes tied. She needed someone to sit across from her at the table and pretend that morning was a normal thing that happened to normal people." He paused. "And then after a while, I didn't have to pretend anymore." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I was the opposite," she said finally. "I went to work. Every morning I went to work, because at work I knew what to do. I had always known what to do at work. And coming home—" She stopped. "Coming home felt like failing at something I didn't have the right tools for." "You're here now," Nathan said. "I'm here now," she said. And she said it like it meant something, like she had come a very long distance to be able to say it. Across the park, Sophie picked up a rock and held it out to Lily. Lily took it and turned it over in her hands, the same way she had turned the relay over, with the same careful, total attention. "She treats everything like it might be important," Nathan said. "Lily, like anything might be the thing that matters." "She always did," Victoria said. "When she was 3, she spent 45 minutes studying a crack in the sidewalk outside our building, just sitting beside it, looking at it. I almost picked her up and carried her home because I thought something was wrong." She paused. Then she looked up at me and said, "Mom, I think the sidewalk is trying to breathe." Nathan looked at her. "And you said," he asked. "I said we needed to get upstairs because I had a call in 10 minutes. Victoria's voice was even, but the thing behind it wasn't. She stopped talking about the sidewalk, never brought it up again. The bench was quiet. "You couldn't have known," Nathan said. "I should have been paying a different kind of attention. You were paying the kind of attention you knew how to pay." He looked at her. "That's what you're changing now. That's what this is." He gestured loosely at the park, at the girls at the fountain. Victoria looked at her hands for a moment. "I want to ask you something," she said. "And I want you to tell me the truth, not the version designed to make me feel better." "Okay," he said. "Do you think she'll fully recover?" Victoria said. "Lily, do you think she'll get all the way back?" Nathan didn't answer immediately. Most people would have. Most people would have rushed to reassure her because that's what the moment invited. The worried mother on the park bench, the soft autumn light, the children playing, the whole situation was organized around reassurance. He recognized the shape of it. He didn't give her the reassurance. I don't know, he said. I don't think anybody knows that, including the specialists. Victoria exhaled. Not with relief exactly, with something that was more like the specific release that comes from being told the truth by someone who isn't trying to manage you. But I'll tell you what I think, Nathan continued. I think she's not trying to get back. I think she's trying to go forward. And those are different. How are they different? Getting back means returning to the version of her that existed before the school presentation, he said. Going forward means becoming whoever she is now, with whatever she's learned about herself in the last 11 months. He looked across at Lily. I don't think she wants to be the girl who talked all the time and didn't notice the quiet. I think she wants to be someone who's chosen when to speak. He paused. That's a more powerful thing. Victoria stared at the fountain for a long moment. She's going to be formidable, she said quietly. Not a question. Not a hope exactly. More like a recognition. She already is, Nathan said. Something cracked in Victoria Harper's composure. Not dramatically, not the kind of thing that would have been visible from a distance. Just a slight dissolution at the edges of her careful containment, the way a very controlled structure shows its first signs of giving way before anyone would call it falling. Her eyes went bright. She blinked twice, looked away. Nathan looked away too. Gave her the moment without making it a moment. That was something he had learned, the most important thing. Maybe that dignity was the one resource you couldn't give someone. You could only make room for it. After a minute, Victoria said without looking at him, Rosa, my housekeeper said Lily asked about you yesterday morning, while she was eating breakfast. What did she ask? She asked if Nathan was going to come over. Nathan felt something shift in his chest. Quiet, warm, unexpected. What did Rosa say? He asked. She said she didn't know. She said she would ask me. Victoria turned back to look at him. Her composure was restored, but differently, not armor back in place, more like a slightly different arrangement, more air in it. So I'm asking you. Am I going to come over? That's what I'd like to know, Victoria said. I'm not asking as this isn't a business thing. I'm not trying to... She stopped, organized herself. Lily is comfortable with you. Sophie makes Lily laugh, which I would not have predicted based on any available data. And I would like... Another pause. I would like this to be a normal thing, if you're open to it. What's a normal thing? Dinner, she said. On a Friday, both of them, you and me. She looked at him steadily. Not a business meeting, not a scheduled event, just dinner. Nathan looked at her. Can you cook? He asked. She blinked. What? Can you cook? He repeated. Because I'm not going to a dinner where I watch someone order from a restaurant and plate it as if they made it. She stared at him. Then she said with great precision, I can make 3 things. What 3 things? Spaghetti with jarred sauce that I add things to, scrambled eggs, and a very specific lemon chicken that my mother taught me before she passed that I have never made for anyone outside my immediate family. Nathan looked at her for a moment. Make the chicken, he said. Something in Victoria Harper's face moved in a way he wasn't sure she intended. Okay, she said. Friday then. Friday? He agreed. Across the park, Sophie had apparently made some kind of executive decision, because she was now sitting on the edge of the fountain with her shoes off and her feet dangling, explaining something to Lily with great animation. Lily was sitting beside her shoes, still on, looking at Sophie with an expression of complete attention. Sophie, Nathan called. My shoes are off, but my socks are on. Sophie called back. Your feet are going to get wet. My feet don't mind. Nathan stood up. I need to go, Victoria said, but she was smiling. He walked across the park toward the fountain. Behind him, he heard Victoria stand from the bench, and then the sound of her footsteps following, and he had the specific awareness of someone walking behind him that wasn't entirely professional. A presence, a warmth, a thing that required naming that he wasn't going to name today. Sophie Cole, he said, arriving at the fountain. Dad. Sophie said, looking up at him with the particular expression of a child who is perfectly aware they are doing something questionable and is prepared to negotiate. Lily said the fountain has a pump that works like the relay. Nathan looked at Lily. Lily looked up at him from her seat beside Sophie. Water goes in and water comes out, Lily said carefully. The pump decides the direction. Nathan crouched down to eye level with both of them. That's accurate, he said. See? Sophie said, triumphant. Your socks are wet, Nathan said. Only a little, Sophie said. Victoria arrived beside him. She looked at the two girls, Sophie with her wet socks and her irrepressible satisfaction. Lily with her hands folded in her lap and something in her face that was different from 2 hours ago. More settled, less like someone bracing for something. Victoria looked at Nathan. He looked back. Between them passed one of those communications that don't require language, the kind that happen between two people who have separately learned the same specific lesson about the cost of pretending things are fine when they're not, and the equally specific cost of missing the moments when things genuinely unexpectedly are. This was a moment when things genuinely unexpectedly were. Neither of them made it into more than that. Neither of them made it into less. The Friday dinner happened. It happened in Victoria's kitchen, which was large and high-ceilinged, and had every appliance known to culinary science, most of which Victoria acknowledged she did not know how to operate. "What is that?" Nathan asked, pointing to a machine on the counter. "I genuinely don't know," Victoria said. "Rosa uses it." "Has Rosa used it in your presence?" "Once. I was on a call." Nathan looked at the machine for another moment, then looked away. Sophie was sitting on the high stool at the kitchen island, with Captain in her lap, watching Victoria with the focused attention of a documentary filmmaker covering an unfamiliar subject. She had asked within 45 seconds of arriving whether Victoria had a dog, and upon learning that she did not, had provided a thorough and structured argument for why she should get one. "Sophie," Nathan said. "I'm just saying," Sophie said. "You've been saying for 4 minutes. It's an important topic." Lily was sitting beside Sophie close enough that their shoulders were almost touching. She had shown Sophie her bedroom earlier, an event that had lasted 22 minutes and apparently involved Lily explaining the organizational system for her colored pencils and Sophie proposing several unauthorized modifications to it. Lily had not implemented any of Sophie's suggestions. But she had let Sophie hold the violet one which Nathan had observed from the doorway and filed away without comment. Victoria was at the stove. The chicken was in the oven. She had been precise about it moving with a different quality than the efficiency Nathan had observed in every other context. Slower, more careful, more like she was doing something that cost her something to get right. "You've made this before?" he asked. He was leaning against the counter, his arms crossed, watching her. Watching. "Not in a long time," she said. She was checking the oven without opening it, reading the temperature display. "My mother made it on Sundays, in our apartment in Queens." Nathan looked at her. "You're from Queens," he said. She glanced at him. "You're surprised." He stopped. "A little." "Where did you think I was from?" "I hadn't." He thought about it. "Connecticut," he said. "Old money, something like that." Victoria made a sound that was unmistakably a laugh. A real one, not the quiet, contained version from the coffee shop. An actual laugh, brief and genuine, that changed the whole architecture of her face. "My father drove a bus," she said. "For 23 years. The M15. My mother worked in a dry cleaner's." She turned back to the stove. "I went to City College on a scholarship that I will be grateful for until I stop breathing. I spent my first 6 years in finance being introduced as the girl from Queens by people who thought it was a colorful detail. And now," Nathan said. "Now they don't bring it up," she said, "because I control too much of their capital." She said it with a flatness that was not quite bitterness and not quite pride. Something in between. Something that had been refined by years of contact with both versions of itself. Sophie, Nathan said without looking away from Victoria. What are you doing? Braiding Captain's ear, Sophie said. Captain's ear is not a braid. It could be. Nathan looked at his daughter. Sophie was indeed attempting to make a braid out of the very short plush fabric of Captain's ear, which was not long enough to braid, and had an expression insomuch as a stuffed elephant could have an expression of dignified resignation. Lily leaned over and looked at Sophie's work. It's more of a fold, Lily said. It's a fold braid, Sophie said firmly. Okay, Lily said. She handed Sophie a hair tie from her own wrist. Sophie looked at it with great seriousness, then applied it to Captain's ear fold with the careful intensity of a surgeon. The result was aesthetically questionable. Sophie studied it. Better, she said. Much better. Lily agreed. They looked at each other and something passed between them that didn't require narration. Nathan watched them and thought about loneliness, not his own, not anymore, but the specific loneliness of children who haven't yet found their frequency matched. Sophie was not lonely. Sophie could make friends with a traffic cone, but there was something in the way she was sitting beside Lily. Something aligned. Something that said, this one gets it. And Lily. Lily, who had spent 11 months in a silence that was not emptiness, but protective distance, was sitting close enough to Sophie that their arms were touching, and she was not pulling back. Victoria set plates on the counter for the girls, cut fruit bread, something to eat while the chicken finished. She did it without ceremony, without the particular self-consciousness Nathan might have expected. She just did it. Moved around the kitchen the way people move in spaces where they are genuinely themselves. Victoria, he said quietly. She looked up. This is good, he said. Just that. She understood what he meant. He could see that she understood. Her expression did something quiet and real. I know, she said, and she meant it the same way. They ate at the kitchen table, not the dining room. There was a dining room. Nathan had seen it when Sophie had conducted her unauthorized tour of the apartment, but the kitchen table, which was smaller and less formal, and had the quality of a place where real things happened. Sophie ate with the focused enthusiasm she brought to everything. She asked Victoria 17 questions during the meal, which Nathan tracked involuntarily, including but not limited to whether the chicken had a name before it became dinner, whether Victoria had ever been on a boat, whether the building had a basement, and whether Captain could sleep in Lily's room if they had a sleepover. Sophie, Nathan said after the sleepover question. I'm just asking, Sophie said. You're asking a lot of things. I'm curious, Sophie said. Dad says curiosity is good. Nathan looked at Victoria. Victoria was looking at Sophie with an expression he was coming to recognize, the one she got when Sophie did something that reminded her of something she was slowly getting back. Curiosity is very good, Victoria said. You should always ask questions. Sophie pointed at Nathan. See? She said. I see, Nathan said. Lily had been quiet through most of the meal in the way Lily was quiet, not absent, fully present, following everything. She ate carefully and listened to Sophie's questions and watched Nathan and Victoria with the attention she brought to relays and fountain pumps, looking for how things worked. Toward the end of the meal, she said to Nathan, Is the chicken how you remember it? The table went quiet. Nathan looked at Lily. Then he looked at Victoria, who was looking at Lily with a stillness that reminded him of the doorway. Sorry, he said. The chicken, Lily said. Victoria said her mom taught her. Does it taste how you remember things tasting? Nathan looked at Victoria. Victoria said carefully, What do you mean, Lil? Lily thought about it. When I draw the relay, she said, it's how I remember Nathan's hands showing it to me. If it doesn't look right, I fix it until it does. She looked down at her plate. I thought maybe cooking was like that. You make it until it tastes like the memory. The kitchen was quiet. Nathan looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at her daughter. Yeah, Victoria said, and her voice was not fully steady. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Lily nodded, picked up her fork, went back to eating. Sophie looked around the table, assessing the atmosphere with her characteristic thoroughness, and then said to no one in particular, "Captain thinks the chicken is good too." Nathan laughed first, then Victoria, and then small and careful and perfectly real Lily. The sound of it filled the kitchen, the way a light fills a room when someone finally finds the switch. Not sudden, but immediate, illuminating everything that had always been there waiting. Nathan looked at Victoria across the table. Her eyes were bright. She was not going to cry, but it was close. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he looked at Sophie and said, "Captain can have an opinion about dinner when Captain pays for groceries." Sophie pulled Captain tighter to her chest. "He has feelings, Dad." "He has a fold braid," Nathan said. "Same thing," Sophie said. And Lily laughed again, softer this time, but longer. Victoria reached under the table, found Lily's hand and held it. One squeeze. Lily squeezed back. Not one, not two, three. "I need you right now, and I can't say it, but please don't let go." Except this time it wasn't that. This time it was something new. Something that didn't have a name yet, in the language of hand squeezes that they had built together across 11 months of silence. Something that meant, "I'm here. I'm okay. Stay anyway." Victoria stayed. She pressed her daughter's hand between both of hers. She looked at Nathan across the table. Nathan with his worn jacket, and his careful eyes, and his 4-year-old daughter, who was currently explaining to her stuffed elephant why the chicken was good actually, and she thought something she hadn't thought in a very long time. Not a strategy, not a plan, not a contingency. Just a thought, plain and unhurried, the way the best thoughts come. This is what I was missing. Not the man across the table, or not only him. Not this apartment, not this meal. This. The specific quality of a room where everyone present is exactly where they should be, doing nothing more and nothing less than being together. She had built a billion-dollar company. She had negotiated deals that made headlines. She had survived things she had never told anyone about and come out the other side still moving, still building, still relentlessly forward. And none of it, not one moment of it, had felt like this. Nathan was watching her. Not with anything she needed to manage or respond to, just watching. Present. The way he was present, with everything, without agenda, without performance. Just there. She thought about the relay. She thought about interference. She thought about what her daughter had said: a relay with too much interference can't hear the signal. Right starts making decisions based on noise instead of the real thing. She had been making decisions based on noise for a very long time. The signal had always been here. She'd just been too loud to hear it. Sophie slid off her stool. "Can I see Lily's pencils again?" she asked, already moving toward the hallway with Captain, and the confidence of someone who knows the answer. Lily looked at her mother. Victoria nodded. Lily climbed down from her chair and followed Sophie down the hall, and the sound of their voices drifted back. Sophie proposing Lily, considering Sophie proposing again with greater enthusiasm. Lily holding the line with quiet firmness, and Nathan and Victoria sat alone at the kitchen table with the remains of a meal that tasted like memory and something new at the same time. "Thank you for coming," Victoria said. "Thank you for the chicken," Nathan said. "It was really good. My mother would be appalled by my technique," she said, "but she would have approved of the result." "What was she like?" he asked. "Your mother." Victoria looked at her hands. "Like Lily," she said. Quiet, attentive. She noticed everything and said only what needed to be said. She paused. "I don't know how I ended up the way I am. The volume of me. She was always so still." "You're stiller than you think," Nathan said. She looked at him. "The doorway," he said simply. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she picked up her fork and ate the last of her chicken. "Tell me about Emily," she said. The kitchen was very quiet. Nathan set his fork down. He looked at the table, then at her, and then slowly, without flinching, he began to speak. Emily Cole had loved mornings. That was the first thing Nathan said. Not her bravery, and she had been brave in ways that Nathan still could not fully describe, without his voice doing something he couldn't control. Not her intelligence, not her humor, not the specific quality of her laugh that Sophie had inherited so precisely. It sometimes stopped Nathan mid-sentence when he heard it coming down the hallway. The first thing he said was that Emily had loved mornings. She was up before the alarm every day, he said. Not because she had to be, because she said mornings were the only time the day was still honest, before everything got complicated. He looked at his hands on the table. She'd make coffee and sit by the window and just be there. I used to watch her from the doorway. She never knew I was watching. I never told her. Victoria said nothing. She had learned sitting at this table across from this man that Nathan Cole did not need to be prompted. He needed to be given the room. And so she gave it the same stillness he had given her in the coffee shop in the park, in every conversation where she had needed to move at her own pace. She gave him the room. When the diagnosis came, Nathan continued, the first thing she said to me was, and this was Emily. This was completely her, she said. Don't you dare spend the rest of your life being careful. He looked up. She meant it. She sat in that doctor's office and held my hand and looked me in the eye and said, Nathan, I need you to promise me you won't become careful. What did she mean by careful? Victoria asked. Safe, he said. Small. The kind of life you live when you're afraid of losing more things. She'd seen people do it, pull and protect, stop reaching for anything that could be taken away. His jaw worked for a moment. She knew me well enough to know I would do exactly that if she didn't make me promise not to. And did you? Victoria asked. Keep the promise. Nathan was quiet for long enough that the silence was its own kind of answer. For a while I didn't, he said finally. After she went for the first year, maybe more, I did exactly what she told me not to do. I pulled in, I worked, I took care of Sophie. I did everything that needed doing, and I did it well, and I felt nothing except the edges of things, like I was wearing gloves. Everything got through but muffled. He paused. Sophie is the reason I came back. Not because she needed me to, she needed what I was giving her, the functional version. But because one morning she looked at me across the breakfast table and said, Daddy, where did your face go? Victoria looked at him. She was 3, he said. She couldn't have explained what she meant, but I knew exactly what she meant. My face had gone somewhere that wasn't there. I was present in the room and absent from myself. He met Victoria's eyes. I started coming back after that, slowly. It wasn't a decision exactly, more like I just stopped fighting the returning. What does that mean? Victoria said. Stopped fighting it. Grief is strange, Nathan said. People think it pulls you under, and it does at first. But then there's a second current, the one that pulls you back. And for a long time I thought swimming against that current was a way of honoring her. Like if I came back too quickly, it meant I hadn't loved her enough. He shook his head. Emily would have been furious with me for thinking that. She sounds like someone who knew her own mind, Victoria said. She knew everyone's mind, Nathan said, including mine, usually better than I did. The ghost of a smile. She would have had opinions about this dinner, by the way. Good opinions or bad ones? Good, he said. She would have liked you. Victoria absorbed that. What makes you think so? Because you make things happen, Nathan said. Emily respected people who made things happen. She also had no patience for people who used that as an excuse to stop feeling things. He looked at her steadily. She would have seen both in you. She would have found that interesting. Victoria looked at the table. I think I stopped feeling things around the same time Lily stopped speaking, she said. I didn't notice it happening. That's the frightening part. I was so focused on fixing the external problem that I didn't register that I was shutting down internally to manage it. Compartmentalization, Nathan said. It's a very effective strategy, Victoria said. right up until it isn't. When did you notice it wasn't? She thought about it. The corridor, she said. Standing in that doorway. When I heard her voice. She paused. Something cracked open that I hadn't realized I'd sealed shut. Nathan nodded. From down the hall came the sound of Sophie's voice raised to its standard operating volume, which was to say fully audible from a distance, describing something with great enthusiasm. Lily's voice came back lower, measured the specific cadence of someone who is choosing to engage rather than being pulled in involuntarily. The sounds wove together into something that was nothing more than two children in a room, and was somehow one of the most important sounds Nathan had heard in months. She keeps doing that, Victoria said, listening. Sophie, Lily, choosing to respond. Victoria was looking down the hallway. She doesn't have to. Sophie gives her every possible exit. Sophie doesn't demand response the way most children do. But Lily keeps choosing. Because she wants to, Nathan said. Because she feels safe enough to want to, Victoria said. There's a difference. There is, he agreed. Victoria stood and began clearing plates. Nathan stood too and took the glasses. They moved around the kitchen in a silence that was not uncomfortable, the particular kind of silence that exists between people who have said enough real things that the quiet between them has weight and texture rather than vacancy. Can I ask you something? Nathan said. Yes, she said. What happened to her father? Victoria's hands paused for just a moment over the sink, then continued. He left, she said, when Lily was 18 months, not dramatically. There was no other person, no catastrophic event. He just concluded that what he wanted and what our life together was were not the same thing. She was matter-of-fact about it, not cold, just settled in the way you get settled about things you've had time to place. He's in London now. He calls Lily on her birthday. She doesn't know him well enough to miss him specifically. I think she misses the idea of what he would have been. Do you miss him? I miss the version of him I thought I was building a life with, Victoria said. Not him. The him that existed was someone I realized I'd been managing rather than loving. She turned and looked at Nathan. I'm very good at managing things. It took me a long time to understand that managing something and loving it are not the same action. Nathan leaned against the counter. Emily told me once, he said that my worst quality was that I loved people like missions, like if I could just execute everything correctly, the outcome would be guaranteed. He paused. She said that was the Navy in me. She said love didn't work that way. Love was the thing that happened in the space between missions. Victoria looked at him. She sounds like someone who would have been very hard to argue with, she said. Impossible, Nathan said. I tried twice, lost both times before I finished my opening sentence. The almost laugh again, and then this time, slightly more than an almost. Tell me something, Nathan said. When was the last time you painted? Victoria stopped, looked at him. You remembered that, she said. You said watercolors, he said. You said you were terrible at it. You said it was the only hour that belonged to you. She turned back to the sink. I don't know, she said. 8 years, maybe 9. Why specifically? She was quiet for long enough that he didn't push. Then she said, because the last painting I did was of Lily. She was about 4 months old. I set up in the spare room after she went to sleep, and I painted her from memory, from the specific way she looked when she was sleeping with her hands open, the way babies sleep with their hands completely open, like they haven't learned yet that things can be lost. She paused. It was the worst painting I'd ever done. Terrible composition. The color was completely wrong. I kept trying to get the light right, and I couldn't. Another pause. I threw it away. Quit. Nathan said nothing. I wish I hadn't, she said quietly. You could paint her again, he said. She's different now. Paint who she is now, he said. She sounds like someone worth painting. Victoria looked out the window above the sink. I bought watercolors last week, she said. And they're in a bag in my closet, she said, unopened. Nathan looked at her. Victoria, he said. She turned. Open them, he said. Simply. No pressure behind it. No strategy. Just the straightforward sentence of someone who meant exactly what he said. She held his gaze. Okay, she said. From down the hallway came a sound that made both of them turn. Not an alarm, not distress, but a very specific sound that Nathan Cole had only heard a handful of times in the past year, and always for a similar reason. Sophie crying. Not the theatrical crying of a tired 4-year-old who wanted something. The other kind. Small and real, and quickly getting quieter, which meant she was trying to stop it. Nathan was already moving before his brain had fully processed it. He found them in Lily's room. Sophie was sitting on the floor with Captain held against her chest, and her face was doing the specific thing it did when she was trying very hard to be brave. Chin up, eyes wide, rapid blinking to manage the overflow. Lily was sitting directly in front of her. Not beside her. In front of her. Close enough that their knees were almost touching, and Lily had both hands wrapped around Sophie's free hand. Nathan stopped in the doorway. Victoria came up beside him. What happened? Nathan said, keeping his voice easy. Sophie opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. I told Lily about Mama, Sophie said. Her voice came out small and uneven. I told her Mama lives in the sky, and then She stopped. The chin lifted higher. I just miss her. Nathan's throat closed. He had been waiting for this, not anxiously, but with the patient awareness of a parent who knows their child is carrying something and is watching for the moment it comes up for air. Sophie didn't talk about Emily often. When she did, it came out of nowhere and landed hard the way grief does when you're 4 years old, and the concept of forever is still too large to fit in your understanding. He started to move into the room. Lily squeezed Sophie's hand, and then Lily said in a voice that was quiet and certain and completely steady, My grandma lives in the sky too. Mom told me she watches from there. Sophie looked at her. Do you think they know each other? Sophie asked. Lily thought about it, seriously carefully in the way she thought about relays and the color violet and the memory that cooking was trying to get right. Yes, she said. I think the sky is big enough that you can always find who you're looking for. Sophie stared at her. Then she leaned forward and put her head on Lily's shoulder. Lily, who had spent 11 months in silence, who had pulled back from every touch that felt like management, who had learned the difference between people who were present and people who were performing presence, Lily put her arm around Sophie's shoulders and held on. Nathan stood in that doorway and could not speak. He felt Victoria's hand close briefly around his arm. Not for long, just for a moment. Her fingers on his jacket sleeve, a pressure that was there and then released. He didn't look at her. He didn't need to. They stood in the doorway together and let the two children hold each other and said nothing because there was nothing that needed to be said. The room was already full of the only thing that mattered. After a minute, Sophie sat back up. Her face was calmer. She looked at Captain, then at Lily. Captain thinks your mom's mom would watch out for my mama, Sophie said. Lily looked at the elephant. Captain's smart, she said. He really is, Sophie agreed with complete seriousness. They stayed until 8:30. Sophie fell asleep on the couch, with Captain 45 minutes before they left in the specific way of 4-year-olds who are done with the day, but refuse to admit it until their body makes the decision for them. Nathan carried her out to the car, with the ease of someone who had performed this operation many times, her head on his shoulder, Captain dangling from one limp hand. Lily stood in the doorway beside Victoria and watched them go. Dad, Sophie murmured, not fully awake, as Nathan opened the car door. Right here, he said. Is Captain with us? Captain's in your hand. A pause. Sophie's fingers tightened on the elephant. Then she was asleep again. Nathan got her settled, closed the door carefully, and turned. Victoria and Lily were still in the doorway. He walked back to them. Lily looked up at him. Is Sophie okay? She asked. She's perfect, Nathan said. She's just tired. She cried, Lily said. She did, Nathan agreed. Sometimes you need to. Lily considered this. I know, she said. I cry too, but quietly. Nathan crouched down to her level. That's okay, he said. Crying doesn't have a required volume. Lily thought about this with her usual deliberateness. Then she held out her hand. In her palm was the violet pencil. Nathan looked at it. It's for Sophie, Lily said. So she has the beginning color. Nathan took the pencil very carefully. I'll give it to her when she wakes up, he said. Lily nodded. Then she looked at Nathan with those dark, careful eyes that missed nothing. Nathan, she said. Yeah. The relay you showed me, she said. Does it ever get tired of carrying the signal? He looked at her for a long moment. No, he said. That's what it was built for. Carrying the signal is what it's for. Lily absorbed this. Okay, she said. She stepped back into the apartment. Then, without turning around, she said to the air in front of her, to the hallway, to the warm-lit interior of a home that was slowly, genuinely beginning to feel like one, come back on Sunday. It was not a question. Nathan stood up. He looked at Victoria. Victoria was watching her daughter walk back down the hallway toward her room, and the expression on her face was the one Nathan had first seen in a service corridor 10 days ago, wonder and grief and gratitude braided so tightly together you couldn't tell where one ended and another began. She turned and looked at him. Sunday, she said. Sunday, he agreed. He walked back to the car. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine. Sophie's breathing filled the car slow and even. The city moved around them. A light changed on the corner. Somewhere nearby, someone was having a conversation he couldn't quite hear. He opened his hand. The violet pencil lay in his palm. Beginning of the colors, Lily had said. Violet comes first. He held it for a moment. Then he put it carefully in the cup holder where Sophie would see it when she woke up. He started the car and pulled out into the city, and the lights came through the windows in shifting patterns, and Sophie slept through all of it. And Nathan drove and thought about the things you carry, and the things you're finally allowed to put down, and the difference between surviving and choosing, which Emily had tried to teach him, and which he was beginning slowly in the way that all real things happen without ceremony or announcement to understand. He thought about a woman who had stood in a doorway and not moved. He thought about a little girl who had said she sounds nice into a silence that had held her for 11 months. He thought about relays and the color of thunder and violet pencils and chicken that tasted like memory. He thought about Sunday. He drove home through the city with his daughter asleep in the back seat, and for the first time in a long time, not performing it, not constructing it, but actually genuinely feeling it the way you feel. Weather or music or the specific weight of a sleeping child, he felt like a man who had somewhere to go. Back in the apartment, Victoria stood in Lily's doorway. Lily was already in bed, her colored pencils arranged on the nightstand in their usual order, the gap where Violet had been a small, deliberate absence. Mom, Lily said. Yeah, Lil. Sophie said when you love someone and they go away, they become part of the sky. A pause. Do you think that's true? Victoria sat on the edge of the bed. She thought about her mother, about the dry cleaners in Queens and Sunday chicken, and a woman who noticed everything and said only what needed to be said. I think, she said carefully, that the people we love don't really go away. I think they become part of how we see things, part of what we notice, part of how we treat other people. Lily thought about this. Like the relay, she said. Victoria blinked. What do you mean? They keep carrying the signal, Lily said, even when you can't see them doing it. Victoria looked at her daughter. The daughter she had spent 11 months trying to bring back, trying to fix, trying to reach across a silence that was not emptiness, but a different kind of full of something she had been waiting to feel safe enough to carry back into the light. And here she was, not fixed, not recovered, just here, fully, undeniably, extraordinarily here. Yeah, Victoria said. Her voice was not steady. She didn't try to make it steady. Just like that. She kissed Lily's forehead. She turned off the light. She stood in the hallway outside her daughter's room for a long moment in the dark and the quiet, with the city doing what the city did outside the windows, and her daughter's breathing reaching her through the door steady and real. Then, she went to her closet. She found the bag. She took out the watercolors. She carried them to the kitchen table. She sat down. She opened them, and she began. The watercolors were terrible. Victoria knew this. She had no illusions about it. The first painting she produced on that Friday night, sitting alone at her kitchen table at 10:45 with the city quiet outside and her daughter breathing softly down the hall, was an object of genuine artistic failure. The proportions were wrong. The water-to-pigment ratio produced something that bloomed and bled in ways she hadn't intended. The paper buckled. The violet she was trying to capture for Lily's coat came out closer to gray, which felt cosmically appropriate given what Sophie had said about the color of thunder. She painted it anyway. She painted until midnight. She produced 3 small, technically catastrophic watercolors. One of Lily's hands, one of the relay from memory, one of the kitchen table as it had looked an hour ago, with 4 plates and 2 children, and something warm happening in the middle of it that she could feel but not yet render. She looked at them lined up on the counter. They were bad. She felt better than she had in months. Sunday came the way the best things come, without the weight of being anticipated too heavily, because Victoria had deliberately not anticipated it too heavily. She had made a decision somewhere between Friday night and Saturday morning that she was going to practice a skill she had always considered beneath the dignity of her professional discipline. She was going to let things happen at the pace they happened. She made the morning normal. Lily helped her set the table. Not prompted, just appearing in the kitchen with the placemats and arranging them with the precision she brought to everything. 4 placemats. She put them out without being asked for 4. Victoria noticed, said nothing. At 11, Nathan's car pulled up outside. Lily was at the window before the doorbell rang. Sophie arrived, like Weather the Bell, the voice already in progress, before the door opened, the green coat captain in the regulation position under one arm. She walked in and stopped in the hallway and looked around with the assessing eye of someone returning to a place they've decided belongs to them. "The apartment smells good," Sophie announced. "I made soup," Victoria said. Sophie turned to Nathan. "She made soup." "I heard," Nathan said. "From scratch?" Sophie asked Victoria with the gravity of someone for whom this distinction mattered enormously. "From scratch," Victoria said. Sophie looked satisfied. She turned to Lily. "Hi." "Hi," Lily said. "Captain has the pencil," Sophie said. She held up the elephant. The violet pencil was tucked into the fold of Captain's braided ear, the fold braid Sophie had created 2 days ago, which had apparently achieved permanent status. He's been keeping it safe. Lily looked at the pencil in Captain's ear. "Good," she said. They went down the hallway together. No negotiation, no transition, just 2 children moving through a space that had already decided to be theirs. Nathan stepped inside. He handed Victoria a paper bag. "What's this?" she said. "Sophie picked out fruit," he said. She was very specific about the selection process. I'd estimate it took 22 minutes. Victoria looked in the bag. The fruit was immaculately chosen, not a bruise, not an overripe edge. "She's thorough," Victoria said. "She is relentless," Nathan said. "There's a difference." Victoria smiled. She took the bag to the kitchen, and Nathan followed, and they moved around each other with the ease of people who had already established the choreography of a shared space without having discussed it. "How was your week?" he asked. "Busy," she said. "But differently busy." She paused. "I left the office at 6 every day." He looked at her. "Every day." "Marcus had a minor crisis about it on Wednesday," she said. "He thought something was wrong with me." "What did you tell him?" "I told him something was right with me," she said. He didn't know how to enter that in the calendar system. Nathan laughed his real laugh, the one that was lower and less frequent than Sophie's, and more complete for it. "I painted," Victoria said. "Yeah. 3 things. They were terrible." "What were they of?" "Lily's hands, a relay. The kitchen table on Friday night. Nathan looked at her. "Can I see them?" he asked. "No," she said. "Why not?" "Because they're terrible," she said. "I told you. Being terrible at something isn't a reason to hide it." "It is when you're me," she said. But she said it with a self-awareness that took the defensiveness out of it. An honest accounting, not a wall. "Victoria," he said. She looked at him. "Show me the paintings," he said. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she turned and went to the counter where she'd propped them against the backsplash. She had moved them there from the closet this morning, which she was not going to examine too closely. She picked them up and held them out without ceremony. Nathan took them, looked at each one, took his time with it. She stood there and let herself be looked at, through the work, which was its own particular vulnerability, different from the boardroom kind, different from the kind she'd developed through years of managing perception. More exposed, more true. "These are not terrible," he said. "They objectively are," she said. "The proportions are off," he said. "The color is inconsistent. The paper's warped." He looked up at her. "But you can feel what you were trying to say. That's not nothing. That's actually the hardest part." Victoria looked at the paintings in his hands. "The hands are lily," she said. Needlessly, he could see it. But she said it anyway, because it was the kind of thing that needed to be said out loud. "I know," he said. "I painted them because I kept thinking about how she held the relay," she said. "How she held everything, like it might be important, like it deserved that kind of attention." She paused. "I don't think I ever gave things that kind of attention." "You're giving them that kind of attention now," Nathan said. He set the paintings back against the backsplash. He looked at them for another moment. "Emily painted," he said. "Not watercolors. Oils. She was good, really good. After she died, I couldn't look at the paintings for about 6 months. Then one morning, Sophie climbed up on the bed and pointed at the painting above the dresser, a landscape the coast of Maine. We'd gone up there the summer before, and said, 'That's Mama's painting.' And I said yes, and she said, 'So Mama is still in it.'" He paused. She said it completely matter-of-factly, like it was just obvious. Victoria was very still. "And is she," Victoria asked quietly, "still in it?" "Every time I look at it," he said. The kitchen held them both for a moment, the soup on the stove doing what soup does, filling the air with something warm, something that asked nothing. "Nathan," Victoria said. "Yeah. I want to tell you something, and I need you to hear it as what it is. Not as—" She stopped, organized herself. "Not as anything more complicated than what it is." "Okay," he said. She looked at him directly. "You changed something," she said. "In that corridor. What you did with Lily, the way you were with her, it changed the direction of something I didn't know how to change." She held his gaze. "And I want you to know that. I want you to know that I see it. Not as a debt, not as something I need to balance. Just—" a pause. "I see what you did, and I see who you are, and I am grateful in a way I don't have adequate language for." Nathan was quiet. "She did the work," he said, as he had said before. "You made the room," she said, as she had said before. They looked at each other, and then Nathan said quietly, and without any particular ceremony, "I want to keep making room, if that's something you want too." The kitchen was very still. Victoria looked at him. This man with his worn jacket and his honest eyes, and the 11 years of weight he carried without performing it, and the 4-year-old daughter who talked to walls and kept a violet pencil in her elephant's ear, and felt something she had been cautious about feeling arrange itself clearly and without ambiguity inside her chest. "Yes," she said. Simply, the same way he'd said it. Without elaboration, without management, without the 17 subordinate clauses she might have constructed around a yes of this magnitude 6 months ago. Just yes. Nathan nodded once. Not with relief, more like confirmation. Like a relay receiving the signal it was built to receive. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. She, From down the hallway, Sophie's voice rose to its operational volume. "Dad, Lily has a purple pencil that matches the relay, and I think Captain needs one too." "Captain has the violet pencil." "Sophie," Nathan called back, "that's Captain's pencil. I'm talking about Captain's own pencil." Nathan looked at Victoria. "This is what you're agreeing to," he said. "Full disclosure." Victoria looked toward the hallway where the voice was currently explaining at high volume the philosophical distinction between something belonging to you and something you merely hold in safekeeping. "I know," she said. She was smiling. The real smile, the one that used the eyes, the one that Sophie's arrival had begun drawing out of her in the park, and that had been appearing with increasing frequency and decreasing surprise over the past 3 weeks. She went to the stove and stirred the soup. Nathan went to the hallway to negotiate the pencil situation. And the apartment, which had been beautiful and expensive and carefully assembled and very, very quiet for a long time, did what spaces do when they finally receive what they've been missing. It opened. Just slightly. Just enough. The way a relay opens when the signal clears. 6 months passed. They pass the way time passes when you stop fighting it and start using it quickly, not because nothing happened, but because everything that happened was the kind of thing that fills a life rather than emptying it. Lily turned 7 in December. Her birthday party had 12 children and was held in the apartment and was by any objective measure loud. Victoria sat in the kitchen doorway and listened to it and did not manage it from a distance. She was in it. She was present in the way Nathan had shown her presence, looked, not controlling, not arranging, not curating. Just there. Lily stood at the center of it and did not press herself against walls. She talked. Not the narrated documentary quality of her early childhood, something different, something more deliberate, more chosen. She was the quietest person at her own birthday party, and she was also somehow its center of gravity. Kids drifted toward her. She said things that made them stop and think. She asked questions that nobody had thought to ask. Sophie, who had appointed herself the party's director of operations, was everywhere at once. Nathan stood beside Victoria in the kitchen doorway. "She's going to be formidable," he said. "I know," Victoria said. "I told you that." "You did," he agreed. "I'm confirming." Victoria leaned against the doorframe. "Dr. Reyes says she may not need the weekly sessions much longer," she said. Dr. Reyes was the new therapist, Lily's third, the one who in their first session had sat on the floor rather than behind her desk, which had apparently been the right decision. "She said the progress in the last few months has been—" Victoria stopped. She used the word remarkable. Then she used the word authentic. She said the difference was that the progress was coming from inside rather than being produced by external management. "That tracks," Nathan said. She also said, Victoria continued, that the single most significant factor in Lily's improvement was consistent, genuine presence from her primary caregiver. She looked at him. She said it had clearly changed in quality, not just quantity. Nathan looked back at her. "You did that," he said. "We did that," she said. He didn't argue. Because it was true, and he had learned enough about Victoria Harper in 6 months to know that she didn't say things she didn't mean, and she didn't distribute credit as a courtesy. When she said we, she meant the specific, deliberate two-person thing that they had been building since a Friday dinner and a park bench and a coffee shop on 47th Street. He reached over and took her hand. She let him. Sophie appeared in the kitchen doorway, breathless hair half escaped from its ponytail, completely elated. "The cake is ready," she announced. "I told Rosa to put the candles in, but she said that's a family job." Victoria looked at her. Something moved in her face, quick and warm, and completely unguarded. "She's right," Victoria said. "That's a family job." She pushed off the doorframe. "Come on." Sophie grabbed her free hand, and Victoria Harper walked toward her daughter's birthday cake with a 4-year-old on one side, and a man who fixed things on the other, and the word family sat in the kitchen behind them, and meant exactly what it was supposed to mean. January brought a board meeting. Victoria had been preparing for it for 3 weeks. Not obsessively, not in the way she would have prepared a year ago, working herself raw at midnight with Marcus sending urgent revisions. She had prepared the way she was learning to do everything now thoroughly, but within the hours she had decided to give it, which stopped at 7 every evening because Lily was home at 5, and those 2 hours mattered in a way that the board's approval of a quarterly projection did not. The meeting was in the large glass conference room on the 43rd floor. 17 board members. The agenda included the quarterly review, a proposal for 2 new fund initiatives, and an item Victoria had added 3 weeks ago that Marcus had read 4 times before bringing to her with an expression she hadn't seen on his face before. "You want to create a veteran and working family investment program?" he had said. "Yes," she had said. "An investment program," he had repeated. "Not a charitable giving initiative, not a foundation. An investment program." "The distinction matters," she said. "Charity is what you do when you feel guilty. Investment is what you do when you see value." She looked at him. "I see value." Marcus had looked at the proposal for another moment. "The board is going to ask what prompted this," he said. "Tell them I met someone who reminded me what the word infrastructure actually means," she said. Now she stood at the head of the conference table and looked at 17 faces that she had been managing for years and said what she had come to say. "We're going to talk about the fund initiatives in a moment," she said, "but I want to start with something that isn't on the standard agenda." She looked around the room. "I want to talk about what this company is for." The room was quiet in the specific way rooms go quiet when Victoria Harper sets her hands flat on a table and means something. "I've spent 12 years building Harper Financial on the principle that value is measurable," she said. "That the right data, the right analysis, the right positioning produces returns. And that's true. It's true and I'm proud of it." She paused. "What I've learned this year is that some of the most significant value in any system is carried by people and structures that the standard metrics don't capture. People who keep things running. People who show up without recognition and maintain the infrastructure that everything else depends on." Another pause. "I've been in this building for 8 years. 6 months ago, I discovered that a man named Nathan Cole had been keeping this building's elevator systems operational for 3 of those years. I had never known his name. I had never passed him in a hallway. He was invisible in the way that people who do essential work are often invisible." She looked around the room. "That's a failure, not his. Ours." The board did not speak. "The proposal you have in front of you creates a dedicated investment fund for small businesses owned by veterans and working-class families," she continued. "Not grants, not charity. Equity stakes, revenue-based financing, mentorship connections with our existing portfolio. We are investing in people who have demonstrated the capacity to build and maintain essential things under conditions that most of our current portfolio companies have never faced." She let that settle. "I believe the returns will be competitive. I believe the risk is manageable. And I believe that a company that knows the value of invisible infrastructure is a company that understands its own industry better than its competitors." She stopped. Raymond Cho, who had been on the board for 9 years and who Victoria privately considered the sharpest mind in the room after herself, leaned forward. "What's the first investment?" he asked. Victoria looked at him. "A building systems company out of Queens," she said. "Reliable infrastructure services. They've maintained contracts with 14 Class A buildings in Manhattan over the past 3 years. 0 complaints. On-time service record of 97%. Owner-operator with 11 years of military service and a technical skill set that is undervalued by every standard market metric we currently use." She held Raymond's gaze. "I've reviewed their books. Their capacity is constrained by capital, not by capability. The ceiling on this company is significantly higher than its current altitude." Raymond sat back. "You've done the diligence," he said. "I always do the diligence," she said. There was a pause. Then Raymond Cho said, "I'll move to approve." 7 other hands went up around the table, without waiting for a second. The measure passed 11-6. Victoria had known it would. She had done the math on the room before she walked in the way she always did. But she had not been certain, and the uncertainty she was discovering was not something to be managed or eliminated. It was something to be present for. She gathered her notes. Marcus appeared at her elbow as the room began to move. "Nathan Cole," he said quietly. "Yes," she said. "You didn't mention the personal connection," he said, also quietly. "A professional observation, not a criticism." "The personal connection isn't why it's a good investment," she said. "The numbers are why it's a good investment. The personal connection is why I notice the numbers." She looked at Marcus. "Those are different things." Marcus absorbed this. "Yes," he said. "They are." Mag. Nathan found out about the investment on a Tuesday evening. Not from Victoria. She had told Marcus to arrange the formal communication through the appropriate channels, because that was what the situation required, and Nathan deserved the full version, not a casual mention at dinner. He received a call from Marcus Professional and clear outlining the terms of the investment, offer the expected partnership structure, and the capital being made available. He called Victoria 20 minutes later. "You could have told me," he said. His voice was even, but there was something underneath it she needed to hear. "I'm telling you now," she said. "Victoria." "Nathan," she said. "Listen to me. I looked at the books because I was curious about your company and because I had access. And because I think about things in financial terms, the way you think about things in systems terms. It's just how my brain works. And what I found was a company that is being constrained by capital and nothing else." She paused. "I would have made this investment if I'd found the books without knowing you. The due diligence would have led me here. I'm certain of it." A pause on the line. "Is that true?" he said. "Nathan," she said. "When have I told you something that wasn't?" Another pause. Longer. "Never," he said. "The investment is because the company deserves it," she said. "You deserve it. What you've built deserves it." She paused. "And yes, I love you. Those things are both true, and they're not in conflict." The line was very quiet. She had said it plainly. Without architecture around it, without the 17 subordinate clauses she might once have used to manage a statement of that size. She had said it the way Lily said important things carefully, after consideration, with full commitment to the weight of the words. Nathan said, "I love you too." He said it the same way, simply, like a relay receiving what it was built for. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. She could hear faintly Sophie in the background singing something to Captain with tremendous conviction and no apparent melody. "Sophie is performing again," she said. "She never stops," he said. "Lily is going to love that forever," she said. "I know," he said, and she could hear the smile in it, the specific warmth of a man who had spent 3 years carrying something heavy and had slowly, carefully, without surrendering any of its meaning, learned to carry it differently. "Come for dinner Friday," she said. "We'll be there," he said. None. Spring arrived and the city did what the city did, turned green in the places it could and gold in the places it couldn't, and moved at its relentless pace without asking anyone's permission. On a Saturday in April, Victoria set up her watercolors at the kitchen table while Lily and Sophie were in the living room, and Nathan was doing something to the kitchen faucet that had been making a noise Victoria had stopped noticing entirely, and that Nathan had clocked within 5 minutes of arriving that morning. "You're fixing my faucet," she said. "The washer's worn," he said from under the sink. "I have a maintenance service for that." "You have a maintenance service that charges you $400 to do what I'm doing for free," he said. "I can afford the $400, she said. "That's not the point," he said. She looked at the top of his head, which was the only part of him currently visible. "What's the point?" she said. "The point," he said from under the sink, "is that some things you fix because you can, and because it's right there, and because that's what you do." Victoria looked at him for a moment. Then she opened her watercolors. She was better now. Not good, she had no illusions about becoming good, and had stopped wanting to. But better. More confident with water. More willing to let a color go where it wanted to go, rather than trying to force it into the shape she'd planned. Dr. Reyes, who she had started seeing herself twice a month, had said something in a session that had stayed with her. Anxiety is the insistence that things go exactly as planned. Recovery is the willingness to be surprised by the outcome. She was working on being surprised. Today, she was painting the kitchen. The kitchen as it looked right now, Nathan's legs extending from under the sink, the watercolors on the table, the sound of 2 children from the living room, the light through the windows hitting the counter at the angle it always hit it on Saturday mornings. She painted it badly and completely. "What are you painting?" Nathan asked from under the sink. "Everything," she said. A pause. Then the sound of a wrench. "Is that technically feasible?" he said. "I'm learning to be surprised by the outcome," she said. Another pause. A small, satisfying clunk from under the sink. "Faucet's done," he said. He slid out, sat up, looked at the table. She turned the painting toward him. He looked at it, the rough suggestion of a kitchen, the 2 legs extending from under a sink that were recognizably his. The blur of color at the table that was her, the light that she'd actually gotten right this time, finally after 11 attempts. "That's us," he said. "That's us," she said. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he reached over and took her hand. He didn't say anything. He just held it the way she had learned to hold Lily's, with full attention, without agenda present, in the specific way that meant, "I am here. I am not going anywhere. This is the only place I need to be." From the living room, Lily's voice rose clearly over Sophie's ongoing performance. "Sophie," she said with the quiet authority that had become characteristic of her, the voice of someone who had chosen every word she spoke, and therefore meant all of them. "If you're going to narrate the story, you have to give Captain a speaking part. It's only fair." A pause. Then Sophie with great seriousness. "Captain, what do you have to say?" A longer pause. Sophie now in a deeper register. "I have been to many kitchens, and this one is the best one." Lily without missing a beat. "He's right." Victoria looked at Nathan. Nathan looked at Victoria. And between them, in the specific, unrepeatable, entirely ordinary morning of a Saturday in April, with a faucet that no longer dripped, and watercolors on the table, and 2 children giving a stuffed elephant his proper narrative, do something settled, not dramatically, not with the weight of a conclusion, just settled the way things settle when they find their right position after a long time of being somewhere else. Quiet. Final. True. Some victories Victoria had learned were not won in boardrooms. Some victories happened in a corridor, where a man sat on a concrete floor and talked about relays to a child who had forgotten what it felt like to choose her own words. Some happened in a kitchen at midnight with terrible watercolors and opened bags, and the first honest hour you'd given yourself in 9 years. Some happened in a park by a fountain, where 2 little girls decided without asking anyone's permission that they belonged to each other. Nathan had once told her that the most important people in any system were the ones nobody noticed. The ones who kept things running. The ones who showed up and did the essential work without recognition or ceremony. He had been talking about building systems. He had meant something larger. Victoria now understood both. She looked at their hands on the table. Her hand in his, the watercolors open, the painting still wet, everything unfinished, in the way all living things are unfinished, everything exactly as it should be. And she knew with the bone-deep certainty she usually reserved for financial truth, that she was not the same woman who had slammed her hands on a conference table and canceled a merger because she couldn't look at her phone without feeling like a failure. She was not that woman. She was this one. The one who had stood in a doorway and waited. Who had learned to open things she had sealed shut. Who had painted 11 bad paintings of a kitchen table and one that finally got the light right. The one whose daughter, 7 years old and formidable, and speaking in full deliberate sentences to everyone she decided to trust, had once whispered 2 words to a stranger in a corridor and changed the direction of everything. She sounds nice. She did. She does. And so did he. And the life they were building, imperfect, ongoing, full of Sophie's narration, and Nathan's quiet competence, and Lily's careful words, and Victoria's finally opening watercolors, that life was not a fixed thing. Not a finished thing. It was a relay, clean and honest, carrying the signal it was built for, carrying it forward, without stopping, without ever intending to stop.